Welcome everybody to Mahogany Thoughts. This is the 20th episode of the podcast. This is the fifth episode of season three. And I am the host, Dr. Terrence Duncan, and I am with the co-host, Queen Carmel Brown. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone.
Absolutely. And Mr. Butler, our resident parent who doesn't like people staring at his daughter in short shorts, and rightfully so, and is en route to the show, coming from a volleyball game. Um, Butler, man, we miss you. Hopefully, you get a chance to jump on board. I know that you're en route. And we also have a repeat guest, a friend of the show, Jatan Brickhill.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. And I learned prior to the recording that she is mega mom. She has 6 kids, and she's going to speak on a subject that we're going to talk about today, which involves parenting. So Karma's going to be leading that, and we're going to have a good time like we always do. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the show. So we are going to go ahead and just go through the brief slideshow. It's just only 2 slides, so we're going to make it quick.
Yeah, we're just going to chit chat. Oh, go ahead. All right.
Yep, you good?
All right.
Okay, so Karma, go ahead and take it away.
Well, so this evening, we're going to talk about parenting during challenging times. This past year has been really tough for parents, and a lot of parents have really struggled and have been pretty hard on themselves about whether or not they've done things the way they need to have done things. And many parents I've seen in counseling this past year overwhelmed and just feeling as though they're juggling many things, many roles. And as we've talked about previously, a lot of things are happening in the same space. And so, not just the pandemic, but other challenging times. Throughout time, each family has their own set of challenges and unfortunately, sometimes crises. And those crises impact your ability to parent effectively. And it also impacts the children's ability to function the way they typically do. So there's been a lot of interruption, and there's been a lot of, I would probably should refer to it as disruption rather than interruption over this past year. And so we just want to give some information and tips on balancing roles and modeling resilience during challenging times, and talking to your kids about challenging times and uncertainty, and just being able to support kids' mental health, because that's something that we forget about, that kids do struggle with mental health issues sometimes due to circumstances, and sometimes due to biological or genetic factors. And then we also want to talk about some age appropriate interventions, because some of our parents are parenting high school or teen children. Some have preteen and adolescents, and then others are parenting elementary school and or preschool age children. So we want to make sure that we give some tips uh, with regards to all those age groups to some degree. And then also self-care strategies for parents. It's really important that parents engage in self-care during these challenging times, or like I said earlier, any challenging times, not just a pandemic. We are coming out of the pandemic. At least I'm speaking that. Lots of people are getting
Break me
vaccinated.
out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm out of it myself. So
Oh, me too.
I don't know about everybody else, but I believe that I am out of it. I am living life as I typically would, for the most part, of course, with caution, proceeding with caution. But I know that most of the members of my family have gotten the vaccination. And Dr. Duncan, I know that you have as well. Yay. So,
Absolutely.
we're just wanting to get back to normal, and we want to help our parents and our families get back to normal. And so that's what we're going to be doing this evening.
So yeah, so talking about the vaccine, just as a reminder for those who stay in St. Clair County or states in Illinois in general and listen to the podcast, the fairgrounds in Belleville, they are having a walk-in clinic. So basically, you can just drive up there, get your vaccine, as long as you're an Illinois resident or work in Illinois. So if you do live in Missouri and you do work in Illinois, you can show proof of employment and you'll be able to get the vaccine. And I don't know which type it is and stuff, but they said they do have variants out there. Children, unfortunately, children are starting to get hospitalized. So the belief that children are not going to test positive is not true. It's starting to show up, and the age of hospitalizations are in the 20 to 30 age group as well as teens. So as parents, please make sure that you're doing everything to protect your children. Like Carmel said, we're going to make it. We're definitely going to get over it. But before we get into this particular episode, you know, Carmel is, for those who have been jumping on and off the podcast and listening, she is a mental health specialist. She is a therapist, and this is in her skill set. And so for those who are wondering, the different dimensions of the podcast and everything like that, we want to make sure that we're incorporating every single topic that really affects our life. And we'll continue to do so and from an educational standpoint as well as a conversational standpoint. So very excited about doing this podcast, and also with Jatan hopping back on the show when she was on the podcast early for marriage and marriage and marital therapy. It should be a fun show. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. And Carmel, actually, Jatan, is there anything that you want to say before Carmel takes it away?
Well, there are a couple things that I've learned throughout this pandemic, and that is definitely going to be let it go. I've had to let a lot of things go within my household, things that were really important before the pandemic. They just could not be the priority anymore, meaning like dishes not being in the sink, small things like that. The kids having their rooms cleaned all of the time, all of those things that were really important. I had to let go. I had to loosen the boundaries a little bit when it came to all of our children, because they're suffering as well. And you kind of have to weigh like COVID or mental health, getting COVID or mental health. So that was it was challenging, but important and necessary. So.
Absolutely. And so before Carmel goes straight into her um, conversation about parenting and from a therapy perspective, and then as a mother herself, for those who are on the podcast, listen to Facebook, you're more than welcome to join in on Zoom as well. We would love to hear your questions live, or we can answer questions on Facebook as well. So Carmel, go ahead and take it away.
All right. All right. Well, good evening once again, everyone. And we want to thank Mega Mama for joining us this evening once again. And so the objectives for this evening. I'm going to talk to you all this evening about some things that I have recently talked to various other groups and employers and such about. And this is really, it's very basic. We're going to keep it practical. We're not going to go overboard and make it to where it's not understandable. We want you to be able to apply this information and these tools and skills to your daily life. And I love what Mega Mama or Jatan just said, which was let it go. That is the best advice I have heard. I'm telling you, and with all of this going on with parents, some things just can't be a priority any longer. So thank you for that, Jatan. Now, objectives. We're going to talk about the kids and how to talk to your kids about difficult things such as a pandemic, balancing roles, like I said, and then just being able to support our kiddos. And, one of the things I want to say with talking to kids about the pandemic or another crisis, maybe it's not a pandemic. That's what we've been dealing with here most recently, but there will be times when there will be other things going on, such as, family members go through crisis such as death and loss and grief. And so I want to encourage the family to, especially parents, to not panic. Not panic. When you panic, you kind of throw the kids into a panic. So remaining calm is very, very important when you're talking to the kids about challenging times or things that are quite difficult. Now, the other thing I want to say is encourage your kids to ask questions, because when the parents are doing all the talking, you're not really getting information from your kids. And it's critical that we get information from them about how they're thinking, how they're feeling, and what's critical to them. Because what's critical to us as parents isn't always what's critical for the children. And providing reassurance and comfort is also very, very important. When they are speaking to us, when they are giving feedback, when they are asking questions, it's really important that not only that we remain calm and not panic, but that we provide reassuring feedback and comfort. And sometimes comfort looks different depending on the child. You may have two or three children in your home, and what each child needs with regards to comfort may be completely different. You may have one child that needs you to lay with them as they fall asleep at night. And some children just may need comforting words, telling them that things are going to be okay and reminding them that they can talk to you and come to you anytime they have questions and such. And, some kids may just need to stay busy, they need activities and engagement. So, make sure that you're in tune to what each child needs and consider their age. Consider the age when you are providing assurance and comfort, and when you're encouraging questions, when you're talking to them. Because if you have a, let's just say, 6 or 7 year old, your conversation with them about dealing with a crisis is going to be completely different with regards to the verbiage that you're using as than if you were talking to your teenage kids. Now, as we're speaking about age, I just want to briefly say that it's critical that you not forget that your older children, your 16, 17, 18 year olds, and even your young adults, your 20 to 25 year olds, they still need reassurance and comfort. And, we'll have Mega Mama to shed a little bit of enlightenment and insight on that and keep the conversation going. One thing that I've learned in therapy is that sometimes my parents, they'll have a conversation with their children, but it's a one-time conversation. And, as we're talking about what approach or attempts they've made to have these discussions with their children, and to just kind of open the floor for them to verbalize their thoughts and feelings. Uh, a lot of parents think that they have sufficiently and adequately had these conversations, and very often I find that they haven't, and that it's been a one time discussion, and it does have to be ongoing. So I just want to ask Jatan, Mega Mama, do you
Yes.
have any insight on the importance of ensuring that our older children also get that reassurance and that comfort that I'm referring to?
Amen. What I have learned is that, well, I have a 28-year-old. Um, she is the oldest out of all the siblings. She's 28, and she still needs, to this day, she needs reassurance and she needs a lot of support. And what I have come across is that sometimes we kind of forget about our older kids. I think kind of culturally it's kind of been like, well, you're grown now, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, you're 23, you're grown, you can handle it. But a lot of times they can't. And it's okay. And it's okay that we still reassure our older children that we're still there for them, that there is a line of communication that is open. I talk to all of my older kids every day. And I try to remember to have those conversations. How are you doing? How are you doing with this? How are you feeling? And we've had to have a couple come back home a time or two, and that's okay too, because sometimes they just need a reset. And while we're going through this pandemic, a lot of us and a lot of our kids need a reset. They just need a do-over. So I would say to remember to love on your older kids. They're still your babies, and it's okay. And I've given myself permission to love on my babies.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And I love what you said about the fact that you talk to your older children every day, because you have older children and you have younger children as well. And you have your youngest is 6, correct?
That's correct.
And so the fact that you still talk to your 28-year-old on a daily basis and you're opening up the floor for discussion with your 28-year-old, and this is happening daily, and you've left the door open for them to return home. And that is also a critical piece, because we talk about the younger kids and how maybe they were functioning well prior to the pandemic, or if once again if it was a different crisis, maybe even before or after the pandemic. And maybe this crisis that they're experiencing, somehow they've gone backwards. They're not necessarily performing as well in school. Maybe a kid that was potty training, maybe they've gone backwards and maybe not doing so well with that. And just, their routine is off and such. And we forget that our adult children may have been functioning well previously, and all of a sudden they may not. And it's kind of a habit for us to say, well, you're this age, like Jatan said, and you should be able to handle it. But during times like this, during challenging times, it may be would you like to come back home? There's always room here for you. That's reassurance when you're dealing with your adult children.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that, Jatan.
Yes. Yes. You're welcome.
Yeah, I wanted
So,
to add. I'm sorry, I wanted to add too and
sure.
stuff that it's okay for children to come back home because it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's just a child, and you're always going to be the parent. They're always going to be the child, no matter how old they are, and that you should be able to keep those lines of communication open. As a father, I have a 20-year-old who's in the Air Force, and we've had some very interesting conversations that that a man should have with his, men should have. And so if he ever did get into a bind or whatever the case may be, he knows that he could always come home. And one of the things I know that we as African Americans joke about it, we shouldn't always be trying to push a child out if they're not ready. You know,
Yes.
we should not, and even if we do encourage them to step out and leave the nest, they should always feel like they're welcome to come back home, because otherwise you're going to lose them potentially to the streets and other vices that are available and stuff. So I did just wanted to kind of add that to the mix.
That's great. That's great information, great insight. You're absolutely right. And, I think it has to, that's a discussion that has to happen. These are consequences of pushing your adult children out when they're not quite ready. You might lose them to, like Dr. Duncan said, to the streets, or sometimes they latch on in dysfunctional and toxic relationships, romantic relationships that they shouldn't be in, because they're looking for that comfort and that reassurance in the wrong places. And there's a host of other things that can occur. We don't, of course, we don't like to think about or talk about it, but chemical dependency is also a risk that a lot of adult children face. They go out into the world, and when they're not coping well and they don't have the skills they need and they don't feel like they have the support, unfortunately, many of them do get involved with substance abuse. And that can, of course, increase the risk for mental health issues and legal issues and physical health issues as well. And the list goes on. So, like Jatan and Dr. Duncan said, it's critical that we make sure our adult children understand that it's okay for them to come back home. I have an adult child myself, and she has completed college and she is back at home working full time, her first time really having a real career. And, we want them to be able to get their thoughts and their lives together. She was supposed to start graduate school this past fall, and due to the pandemic, she was going to have to do her classes virtually, and it wasn't something that she wanted to do. And she felt as though she was going to miss out on the overall experience of graduate school, and she was going to go to an HBCU. And so that was something the graduate students were going to possibly have to do most of their learning online, and she didn't want to. So she's home, she's learning, she's actually starting grad school this upcoming summer, and she's working full time, and she's just resting and relaxing, stress free, no bills, just getting through this time and knowing that she has the support of her parents.
Yes. That's how it should be.
Absolutely. So I want to just talk about real quick that your jobs have to be taken into consideration as we're facing these challenges as parents. Remote learning has been a reality for most parents and kids, and that has posed a set of challenges that we've never seen before. None of us, well, no one that I know personally has ever had to either homeschool their children or supervise or encourage or push remote learning. So this has been very new. At the same time, having to change your career to a remote career, most of us have never done that prior to 2020. So all of this has been very new. Now, I think we have to say that productivity simply may suffer as parents juggle work, a new schedule, and we're pushing kids to do what they need to do with regards to remote learning. Now, uh, many kids now, as we're on the last leg or the end of this pandemic, are now either back on campus or there's a hybrid schedule. I know my teenager has a hybrid schedule where he goes to school on campus only a couple of days a week, and the other days he's remote from home. And that's a challenge for parents because our entire lives as being parents, many of us, especially those of us who have adult children, have been parents for, nearly 2 decades or longer. And for the first time, we have to ask our kids what their schedule is. You know, we've always known that they go to school from 8:30, they get out of school at 3:30 or whatever the schedule is. Every school is different, but something along those lines. And now, like with, my son, he only goes 2 days a week. And so making sure that we're keeping up with these hybrid schedules is a new challenge. Jatan or Dr. Duncan, would either of you like to give any insight on that?
So, excuse me, I'll start off. I know I have a 14-year-old that's in eighth grade right now, and he's super intelligent, super smart. And actually, I was kind of thinking about what you was talking about. I have to have a business-like conversation with him. And I think that when you set the tone and the expectations and just a level of communication, maybe that's best fit for your child, because I probably couldn't do that with my other kid if he was 14 at the time. I think it helps opens the lines of communication, and you can start identifying some of the deficiencies, whether it be something academic or if it could be something that could be underlying. So one of the things that I had to monitor, because there was two adjustments my child had to get adjusted to. The first was me being at home because I traveled all the time, and then the second was going through the pandemic, and we both sucked. At the beginning, we both struggled, but we got a chance to know a lot more about his mental resilience, and then also trying to understand where his some of the challenges may lie, and trying to find ways to figure out how to help him cope better, during the pandemic and stuff. So I knew that social was a big concern, not being around other students. Even though he said he liked online learning and stuff, I knew he missed the social interaction. And so I had to make sure that I had to carve out time to spend time with them. And yeah, it's just one of those things and stuff. You just have to really just have those conversations with your child, regardless of how smart they are, what school district they're in. And so you can, because again, this is your legacy, so this extends more than just the pandemic and everything. This is your legacy. You got to be able to have that relationship with your child, because you never know. Like as Mega Mom was saying, she got a 28-year-old. You never know when that child's going to pick up the phone and say, "Mom or Dad, I need you." And so you want to kind of have those doors open. So that's my thoughts.
That's great.
Yes. For me, it was it was interesting to say the least. Right now, I am balancing a schedule for a 6-year-old. Well, he was 5 at the time, and a 21-year-old. So the 5-year-old, Abraham, he started school, and he had to start school from home, and we had to keep him at this desk for from 8 o'clock until 2:30 in the afternoon. And it was absolutely ridiculous. I felt so bad for him. It was hard, of course, for him to focus. And I'm like, how am I going to get this 5-year-old baby to sit in front of this iPad and be able to focus and listen, to his teacher every day, all day long. So that was very challenging. I felt very bad for him. Luckily for him, it didn't last very long. So we had to kind of get through that for about a month and a half. And then he went back he's now in the classroom. My 21-year-old who's in nursing school, it's still a huge challenge. I still keep up with her schedule, even though she's 21. It's a challenge for her. She's a visual learner. And so it's been very difficult for her to do all of her classes online. So, I have to have those knocks on the doors, Kennedy, are you in class? You know, and she'll say, yeah, but I know she's not, and so that kind of happens, here and there. And I just have to really stay present, which honestly, I was present, but not that present. Like I did not have to keep up with her schedules and whether or not she was in, I knew she was going to school. So trying to make sure that she's logged in every day, even though she's at home, has been a challenge. So
Yeah.
we're still working on it. It's still a work in progress. So pray for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. A work in progress. And I think that's the case for most families.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just kind of learning as we go.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Hey, Carmel, I do have a question though.
Sure.
So for like parents, especially single parents who may be in school districts and might be struggling with equipment connectivity and other little challenges that they might have. What kind of recommendations, advice would you give to them as far as like parenting stuff if they have to, unfortunately, because of their situation, they have to leave their child at home alone
Mhm.
while they are, tending to do whatever they have to do for work because they can't afford childcare or things like that. I mean, how are they going to be able to, be able to maintain that symbols of order, for parents in that particular type of situation?
Sure. Well, there have been some resources, depending on your community. There were, I know in our area in the Metro East, there were a couple of entities that provided in-house virtual learning for for the kids, but they had to be, potty trained. They couldn't be children that were still, having accidents and things like that. They had to be school age, but they had it set up in like gymnasiums and cafeterias and of course social distancing, and they had workstations set up for children to be able to log on. There was wi-fi there so that that wasn't an issue, and they only offered it for certain hours of the day. Of course, resources like that are few and far between. So, with that being said, I strongly encourage parents that have such challenges to connect with other parents in their neighborhood and in their school district and switch off. Like on this day, maybe they can go to your house and maybe you can make sure that the supervision occurs. And maybe on these days, I can remain responsible and make sure that they have connectivity and there's no problems with technology and things like that. So basically, you're networking with other families to make sure that all these kinks are worked out, their supervision, and that any type of issue that may come about is addressed, and that the children aren't left to their own devices to figure out what's going on and how to fix the problem. And most employers have been flexible for the most part. Now, here's the thing, now that we're so late in the game, most of the employers now want their employees back in the office. Not all, but many of them do. And so, if you communicate to your employer that you still have children at home that still are not on campus and they're still doing virtual learning and such, many of them will make accommodations so that you can do your work from home and provide whatever supervision you need for your children at home. So, definitely network with your other parents in your community and also the officials at school, because you'd be surprised at how many resources the schools have. And the previous rules that schools had, they just really don't apply anymore. And they understand that families are facing challenges that they haven't in the past. And so most schools are willing to accommodate in any way that they can. And any challenges or any type of shortcomings that you might have at home, they're willing to help fill in the gaps.
Yeah, thank you for that response.
You're welcome.
That was a great response.
Very welcome. So, another thing that I want to talk about is everyone being at home. Everyone being at home is a challenge in itself. I don't know about everyone else, but in all the years that I've been employed, that I've been married, and that I've been a parent, every single day we get up in the morning and everyone goes their separate ways. Everyone is either going to school or to work in the morning, and everybody's out of the house by, a certain time. Now, with this past year, that changed for every single family in the country for the most part. And so everyone being at home created some new challenges that we never had to deal with. One being lack of space and privacy. Depending on what type of work you do, I know for me, I've had a lot of Zoom and virtual meetings and trainings and seminars and presentations and that. Not to mention, I do well over 100 therapy sessions a month, and 100% of them have been virtual over the past year. Not to mention the increased need for mental health services. So, of course, I've gotten a lot of new clients over the past year, more rapidly than in previous years. So, that space and privacy has been very important for myself. And unfortunately, everyone doesn't have an extra room or an extra office in their home. And maybe they do, but the children are using that for virtual learning. So they're trying to figure out how they can set up office space, space for virtual learning, and everything else that needs to go on because everyone is home. And now the other thing with that is weak boundaries. Setting boundaries as far as when you can be disturbed is very difficult when you're dealing with young children at home. I'm more so talking about those preschool and elementary school age children when they have to go to the restroom or they're hungry, they need a snack, or maybe they're fighting with their siblings, whatever the issue is, they're going to naturally come and find mom or dad, or if they were at school, their teacher, to report whatever the grievance is. They don't care about mom or dad or both mom and dad being in a very important meeting or a therapy session or whatever it is that you have going on. So, being able to communicate that to young children and being able to make sure that they understand and that they're able to accommodate that in any way they can has been challenging. And the other thing, let's just be honest. The needs of our kids has to take priority over certain things at certain times. So enforcing boundaries can be quite difficult. I've had plenty of therapy sessions over the past year in which clients, young children, kind of come in the room and they're asking for things, and parents are apologizing for having to cater to their children. And I've been, more than willing to remain patient and letting them know that I understand that these are different times. This is, unprecedented. Please go and attend to whatever the needs are that your children have. We have an entire hour here. This is your time. I will be here when you get back. You go right ahead.
Yeah, I had a question just on that and stuff because I know that there are numerous parents who have children with special needs. Some of them may be on the spectrum. Some of them may have some other, behaviors associated where they have to get an IEP and whatnot. So when you're at home during a pandemic, you say about setting boundaries. I mean, what kind of advice would you have for parents like, in those particular types of situations to really help their child who has that is on the spectrum or other, IEP related behaviors?
Sure. I'm going to go back to what Mega Mama said earlier. Let it go. There are some behaviors that you're just going to see. behaviors that would more than likely be present if they were at school. Not to mention, probably worse than so because that structure isn't there. And so, just making sure that you're in a mindset in which you understand that you have a special needs child, they don't have the structure that they typically have, and that as a parent, you're doing your best. And so, making sure that whatever you can do to make sure that during those times in which you have important things going on, that there's something that you have kind of set for that child to do with regards to an activity. But let's just be honest. With a lot of kids that are on the spectrum or that may be special needs, you need to have help. It's really important to try and have someone there, whether it's an aide that you've hired, a family member, or a friend, to sit with that child during times when you can't, and to make sure that their needs are being met. And also to make sure that you're able to remain productive at getting the things done that you need to get done. Asking for help is critical during times like this. And, I work with a lot of individuals that they're just not used to asking for help. And this is a time when we all, every single one of us, must ask for help in times and spaces in which we need it.
And I guess one other question, since I'm all over the board with some of the questions, I want to try to make sure I think of different experiences, circumstances. Suicides are up, unfortunately, which is not uncommon in a recession, but it looks like the data is showing that's going to be higher during this pandemic. So for parents who have children who might have suicidal ideations, or they may be struggling with mental health and may not be able to afford therapy, what kind of recommendations do you have for them?
Sure. So, for families that may be facing issues with their children having mental health crises, or maybe even the parents are experiencing mental health crises, or there is suicidal ideation, uh, making sure that you understand that there are community mental health agencies that are available for individuals who cannot afford therapy. You know, everyone's not going to be able to come to a private practitioner such as myself because everyone doesn't have private insurance, or maybe they can't pay out of pocket. But if you have Medicaid, or something like that, or maybe you don't have any insurance at all, going to a community mental health agency is the best way to go. Now, of course, right now, most mental health agencies are kind of backed up, and their waiting list can be a bit extensive. If it's an immediate crisis and there are severe and chronic suicidal ideations, and a child or an adult has intentions or a plan to take their own life, call 911 immediately. Don't play around with it. Don't hesitate. And if for some reason they get to the hospital and you find that it wasn't as critical as you thought it might be, that's okay. It's better to be safe than sorry, as that old cliche. There's a lot of truth to that, especially when it comes to suicide and suicidal thoughts and intentions. Now, I've had, recently had situations in which I've had to call 911 and have 911 or the police department locally to respond to people's homes because I was concerned about the threat of suicide. And, you want to make sure you do everything that you can possibly do to save someone's life. Now, having said that, if a person wants to take their own life, sometimes, hindsight is 2020. There's not much you could have done differently if you were in that situation. But when you're in that space, do what you can. And the best thing you can do is get them to the hospital. So, and once again, take it serious. Any slightest threat of suicide is something that should not, you should always take it serious. It should not be taken as a joke. I've had parents ridicule and say, oh, they're just saying that for attention. We don't know that. And it's important that you not look at it that way, because you will not be happy with yourself if that suicide occurs and it's successful and you didn't take it serious. Now, want to mention some of the local community mental health agencies in our area. Chestnut Health Systems is a great one. If you're in the Metro East, They have a Belleville location, a Granite City location. They have one, I think, in Bloomington. They have like five or six locations, and they basically deal with any issue. They deal with, of course, mental health. They have therapy. They have case management. They have chemical dependency issues, or problems that programs that deal with chemical dependency issues. In addition to that, they also have residential programs for people who are dealing with chronic homelessness. So Chestnut Health Systems, and then like if you're in the East St. Louis area, Comprehensive Behavioral Health is a organization that they have community mental health services, and the list goes on. There's so many of them. But if you have private insurance, or you're able to pay out of pocket, going to see someone who's in private practice is always a good idea. And you can go to psychologytoday.com to find therapists, or you can just call your insurance company and they'll give you a list of providers that are in network in your area. But if it's a suicide threat, 911 is always the answer.
Thank you. Excuse me. And thank you for that stuff, because there has been times, and this is prior to me meeting you before, and I actually even before the pandemic, I've actually had, conversation with parents who was worried about their child's well-being, by means of text messages or just through the behavior. So that's definitely something I would like for us to capture, and I definitely will have that in the notes, when we upload the podcast video and stuff, just to really reinforce, to take it seriously, everybody. If your child is exhibiting strange behavior, whatever the case may be, rather than, yelling and fussing and cussing all the time, maybe we need to just take a step back and listen, because it could be a cry for help. And, it's going to be, tomorrow's not guaranteed, but we want to try to make sure that it's guaranteed for our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And something else to consider is if your child was experiencing any type of mental health symptoms or conditions prior to the pandemic, and I keep referring back to outside of the pandemic, if it's a different type of challenging time, maybe there's been a divorce, or maybe there's been a move, or some major life change, or once again, a death in the family, make sure that you are in tune, number one, to any behavioral changes that might be going on. It's critical that we pay attention and that we listen. Dr. Duncan just said fussing and cussing. That is something that a lot of parents do, thinking that it's just behavior, and it simply might be a response to it might be a traumatic response, and the child may not have the skills required to cope with that particular situation. So it's very critical that we pay attention.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, great info.
Parent. Oh, sorry. Go on, Jatan.
I was just saying, just phenomenal information.
Oh yeah, I agree and stuff. Carmel is definitely, again, it's definitely having great value to have a mental health expert, on the panel, to be able to touch up on issues like this. And it's not just a Black issue; it's a human issue. Now, so I mean, for those who are, not African American and listen to the podcast and stuff, man, by all means, let's pay attention to our children. And that kind of leads into one of her last points on the slides. Self-care strategies. We was joking around earlier, about self-care strategies. Like I had a 14-hour day, and after this podcast, I'm gonna have some self-help for myself, and I'm gonna have my feet kicked back. I'm gonna either get on a video game or just stare at TV and veg out and stuff, because that's my way to decompress. So I'm definitely looking to hearing Queen Carmel's tips for self-care strategies for parents, especially with
Absolutely.
these little kids running around and cutting up and breaking everything.
What, you mean kids actually break stuff? I've never heard of that.
As an adult, I break stuff all the time. So I mean, so remember, I am somebody's child. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yep, I agree. Well, the first thing I want to say is something that I've already said this evening, and that is asking for help. That is something that I think is the most basic thing, but believe it or not, it's one of the most difficult things for a lot of people to do. And especially people who have always felt as though they are on their own, they have to do it on their own. especially if you've ever worked with or around single parents, they're so used to taking care of everything, remaining independent, not needing help, not relying on help or expecting it, that sometimes they're overwhelmed and they won't ask for that help that they so critically need. So that's important. So that's the first thing that I want to suggest. But time management strategies is something else that's really important during these times for parents as far as self-care goes. If you manage your time well, then you schedule in your time to take care of you. And so, because you guys know, you look up and the entire day is gone. I know for me, I look up and the entire week is gone because my schedule is so busy throughout the week. It's like, wow, it's Friday again already. It seems like Friday was just 2 days ago. So, just making sure that you're scheduling things, if you have a planner or something like that, utilizing that. But planning ahead is also important. Knowing the day before, like for example, it's Tuesday night, it's really helpful if you know right now before you go to bed tonight what every single hour of tomorrow will consist of. At least, a roundabout guesstimate. So have an idea as to what your day is going to look like the day before, what you're going to eat, what time you're going to wake up, if you're working out, what time you're going to do that, what time you're going to have the kids ready, what time they need to log on or be out of the door, everything, what time you're going to pay bills, make phone calls, everything that you need to do throughout the day should be written down if possible. But be realistic and be flexible, because just because you write it down, we all know it doesn't always happen the way we want it to happen. Don't just throw your entire schedule out the window because it's not going the way you intended for it to. It's important that you understand that it's just a rough draft, it's a blueprint. It may not necessarily go 100%. It may only be 50% some days. And some days you may get 80% of what's on your schedule or plan done. But the goal is to stick with that to the best of your ability. And then also, it's important that we remember that practicing safety procedures with kids is important. So, say part of your self care is I'm going to take a bath, a hot bubble bath, candles and music, and all of those great things that we love as parents.
I take showers. I don't do the hot candles and bubble baths, just for the record. Just
Yeah.
speaking on Mahogany Thoughts. No bubble
Hey,
baths.
you're
I
going
mean,
to set the
it's great
record
for
straight.
y'all. I mean, it's great to do the right thing and everything like that and stuff, but I take showers.
Yeah.
Quick shower.
Yeah. Yeah. Showers are great, but that nice bath every now and then is great. And if you have children at home, they need to know that, like, maybe you like to listen to music while you're in the shower. And maybe, you've put them down for bed at nighttime. Or maybe they're school age and they're still awake while you're doing that at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, making sure they understand what to do if the doorbell rings and you don't hear, that they know to come to the door and knock on the bathroom door and let you know someone's at the door rather than answering the door themselves, or whatever it is that you believe needs to be discussed with with your children. Not going into the kitchen, making sure that they understand that they're not supposed to touch the stove ever, and if they need anything while you're in the bath or the shower, what you prefer to happen with regards to your safety plan in the event that they need something. So that with self-care, that's critical. Those communication skills and being able to talk to kids in a way that they can understand. And another thing that's important is exploring after school care and extracurricular programs. Now, of course, that's self-care. We haven't had a lot of that here lately, of course, but a lot of the schools are now starting back to add those things to their curriculum. So, especially after this past year, it's a really good time for parents to start thinking about, is this a time when you might want to seek those types of resources out again, so that maybe when you log off from your virtual sessions or your virtual meetings or whatever you have going on, that you have maybe an hour, 45 minutes to take that bath before you go pick the kids up, maybe, so that you don't have to worry about it once they get home. So just looking for resources to give you a little bit of extra time. And then for married couples, I really want to say that it's important that couples don't forget to be a couple. That's critical because everybody's doing everything right now. Everyone's at home, everybody's doing laundry, everyone's cleaning, everyone's logging on, everyone's making sure the kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And a lot of couples, divorce rates have increased over the last year. The divorce rates for definitely the filing paperwork for divorce significantly increased in 2020 compared to 2019 and previous years. And so it's really important that married couples understand that this is a very challenging time for marriages, and you have to be intentional about being a couple amidst all of these things. And so making sure that you're having meals together when you can, making sure that you're going to bed together when you can, if possible, and making sure that you're communicating with each other throughout the day and things like that. So, Jatam, would you like to add anything with regards to self care strategies?
Yes. I would say remember to give yourself grace. We are our worst critics, and I think we're so hard on ourselves a lot of the times, but try to give yourself grace. And I think a change of perception is really important. So instead of looking at things like, oh my goodness, these kids are getting on my nerves, we're all here together. One thing I have decided to do is we do more things together now. So instead of just, I used to focus a lot on what my husband and I were going to do for date night. Now we have like family date nights. So we're doing more bowling together. We're going to go and fishing together. So we just had to kind of change things around, um, how things looked now, and just instead of looking at all of this time we have together in a negative way, look at it as a positive, because when will we all be together like this again after this is over, so just take advantage of the time.
Certainly, certainly. That's great. And another thing I'd like to add is self-care for your kids. We can't forget about that. And one of those things that I think parents forget is that kids get stressed out too. So I mentioned earlier about supporting our kids' mental health, stress management, teaching our kids good, healthy coping skills, and making sure that they have a support system, and making sure that we understand age-related issues, and the difference between our younger children, our teens, and our young adults is very important.
Yes, yeah.
So, sometimes I've heard parents say things like, "Well, you're a kid. What do you have to be worried about?" To some degree, in some areas that may be true, but during a time like this in challenging times, they have a lot to be worried and stressed about. They may not have bills, and I think parents think that because they have all the responsibility that they're the only ones carrying stress, but children do. And even once again, outside of the pandemic, children deal with a lot of stress, and I think as parents we forget what it's like to be a kid. Many of us dealt with very stressful circumstances as children, especially our teenagers. But not only our teenagers, our elementary school age and adolescent children do as well. Socially, there's a lot that happens. There's a lot of self esteem issues. We know that there's a lot of bullying going on, confidence. And if they're struggling with academic performance, that's something that's on top of all of those other things. But, trying to have healthy social skills and coping skills as a child is very challenging.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one thing that I take away from another great presentation, as far as education is concerned, make sure that you're always in constant state of listening. Active listening skills are very important. One thing that you're just listening to you made me think about is that we spend so much time and effort, and it's actually something I put in one of my books, my first book, is that we put in all this effort and energy for somebody else because they're paying us money or whatever. You should dedicate the same level of, tenacity, attention, and care to what you do on a day to day for your home, as well, because you can always get let go. Speaking for somebody, you got to let go twice. But your family is always going to be there. Your family should always be there. And so, make sure you provide just about as equal amount of attention, and give yourself your own little proverbial 15-minute breaks, 30-minute breaks, whatever, to tend to yourself and then tend to your obligations as a parent, because, in the end, your children are looking up to you. And you don't see it when they're kids. You don't see it so much as teenagers and stuff, but again, having a 20-year-old, I see it now, and I see a lot of him and his behaviors very similar to me. And we well documented about some of the challenges I had growing up as an adult. But one thing I'm always talking to him about and stuff, it's like, I want you to do it better than me. Everything that I did before, I don't want you to do the same thing. But I don't put them in this little beautiful box or anything like that. But communication, active listening. If you're not there for your children, you leaving your child to be exposed to have somebody else tell them something that you should be doing. I definitely understand for single parents, whether it's a single mother, a single father, it is difficult, especially in the pandemic, and lost wages. You might have to pick up another job or work 2 or 3 jobs, to maintain and stuff. But just, I mean, that half hour, that little 10-minute or 15 minutes, just listening to your child's day really can go a long way. I personally believe that. And that's something that I do try to practice. I mean, no matter how tired I am, just keep an open ear and stuff, because it really makes a big difference. Because the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, for, as a child, is to have a parent shut you out and act like they don't want to listen to you. I mean, I pretty much grew up in that lifestyle, better or worse. Where it was always work, work, work. And then when they got home, they didn't want to have nothing to do with us. So please make sure that you spend time with the children, because it really makes a big difference. And even as an adult, you still make sure that you spend time with your children as an adult. So thank you very much, Carmel.
Absolutely. You're welcome. That's a really good point. Making sure that, you spend time with them. I know my children are older. I don't have small children. Like I said, I have one adult children and one teenager. And sometimes they don't want to be around their parents. They go in their rooms and they're secluded, and they come out whenever they want food and things like that. But there are times when they want to connect with you. I know there's sometimes when I may just be sitting in the family room watching TV, and my son will just come in and sit on the couch and start talking, and he'll get involved in a movie or a show with me, and cherish those times, engage with them whenever they want to. And sometimes you have to encourage them to engage. If you find that you have kids that are too isolated, you definitely want to make sure that you break that up and you intervene with that, because that could promote depression. But just in conclusion, I'd like to say that it's really important that parents understand that they need a break, and that you're doing the best that you can in these unprecedented and ever-changing times. And we want you to know that you basically you've got this. And it's important that you make sure that you engage in things like regular exercise and practicing good nutrition and keeping your weight under control and things like that, because a lot of people have gained weight over this past year. I've been calling mine the quarantine 15, and I think a lot of people have. But it's important that we feel good and we do things that's going to help us to maintain a good, healthy level of energy, and so that we can get proper sleep. Because when we're not physically healthy, it impacts our sleep patterns negatively. And it's also important that we do things like meditating and just connecting spiritually in any way that we can. And so I just want to just finally say that build resilience, model resilience, show your children what it's like to cope. The best thing you can do is model how to cope. The best thing you can do is model how to bounce back from challenging times, whether it's a pandemic or something else. If they see that their parents aren't coping well, and that their parents are in a ball and a knot, they're in their rooms with the door closed all the time, they're not coming out, they're not talking, they're not doing well, they are recording that. They need to see that you're able to deal with and manage your behavior, your emotions during challenging times. So, model.
Absolutely. Uh,
Amen.
Hey, Jatan, as we are about to get to the close for this episode for tonight, is there anything that you would like to add? Parenting strategies, coping strategies, or self-care techniques and stuff for those um, who may be in the know?
Yeah, yes, I would like to just piggyback off what Carmel said, and you always try to include self-care for your children, of course, and that also can look like doing things together for self-care. And it may be something as simple, if you have girls, as a walk or a manicure, and just engaging. One thing I love to always do is make sure my door is always open until it's night time, but other than that, I always believe keep your door open, and so that you're always available, whether they want to talk or not, but just them knowing that my mom and dad is available to speak with me, is really, really important. So self-care for everyone.
Absolutely. Self-care is very important, especially during the pandemic. And one more thing too, I wanted to add for those who may be um, who may feel like a financial crunch or whatever the case may be, just sit on the backyard and just being with your children. If you got young kids, just let them play out in the back, and you just soaking in some sun, vitamin D, just put your earbuds on, and just decompress, find something that you really enjoy listening to, something to kind of take you back to the good old days or whatever the case may be. I know for myself personally, I work from home often, and I have to always mix it up for my own mental well-being, because otherwise I'm gonna drive myself crazy at home. But I try to get my kid out. I know he's a little bit older and stuff, but that's one thing I do want to see us do more often, is to try to do more outdoor activities, weather permitting, with our children. And it's not always about money. You don't have to always take them to urban arts. You don't have to take them axe throwing and all the other stuff. You can just something as simple as just sitting outside and then let them just do their thing, and then you just sit down and just, relax and wear themselves out. Go back to the way we used to be. Our parents used to let us wear each other out, outdoors, and then come home and eat, go to clean up, go to bed, so
Yes. Until the street lights came
until the
on. We
street
stayed
lights came
outside
on.
until the street lights came on.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
sir.
So this is going to conclude our 20th episode. And Carmel, man, this is cool. 20 episodes. This journey has started, and it's had some fits and starts and stuff, but it's starting well, shape up to a well-rounded show. And I really appreciate your contributions on El Butler as well. I know he's been really tied up with this, the sports kicking back up and stuff. But when we first started, we always, Butler and I joked about getting to 20, 25 episodes. And so, I mean, just think about it, you, as well as you, Jatan, y'all are responsible for putting valuable knowledge on wax, because I'm an old school hip hop head. So we're putting it on wax. I was listening to Mahogany by Eric B. and Rakim earlier today. I kid you.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I was bumping,
Yes.
and it was nice outside too. I mean, I was bumping it hard. You know what I'm saying? So if you're a younger person, listen to Eric B. and Rakim, Mahogany and stuff.
Oh, man, the
Get your life
best.
right. You understand me?
Oh, the best. Like, that's like the best music ever.
I'm telling you, so I mean, it's just really cool and stuff, because we talk about trying to provide solutions to, quality solutions to our problems. And a lot of our problems are more than just, finding a job, starting a business, investing and things like that. I mean, sometimes it's just the soft skills, it's the underlying things that's really important. And so I just wanted to kind of say that, on record and stuff, I'm just really glad to see the evolution of this podcast, and just the evolution of the topics that we're bringing in and stuff. And we still have so much more to do, as we have 7 more episodes left. So next week we have Mr. Butler. He's going to come out of ghost mode, but he actually has some guests that lined up. I know Janet Westbrook of Provider Pool is one of the guests, and he told me the other one, but I can't remember off the top of the head. where we're going to talk about women entrepreneurship. I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, but he will actually be running this running point on this particular program. And then on April the 20th, we will have D'Angelo and Krista Smith from Mycovis. They actually have a business lending franchise. So they actually are brokers. So if you are a small business or you just want to kind of know the things that they're looking for as far as small business and trying to gain access to capital, which is one of the challenges, the number one challenges for the success rate for Black businesses, definitely want to tune into that. And then we still got more episodes with life insurance. Butler's going to lead that. Carmel's going to talk about nutrition and wellness in May. We are going to have SIU Small Business Development Council. We're going to have the director on the show. And we're also going to talk about financial literacy and budgeting so we can, get our money right and everything like that. So I just think that, like I said, this show continues to be more well-rounded. I do want to talk about real quickly, because it has to be talked about, current events. We know currently, as we are recording live on the 6th of April, we have the George Floyd trial going on. Carmel, you are the expert on this. I have told people that I cannot sit down and watch the trial. I do not want to look at any of the reading about it. And so from your perspective and dealing with the trauma, because there is some PTSD for what we saw last year, along with all the other events that happened in 20, any kind of coping strategies that you would recommend for people who are watching the George Floyd trial? I don't have nothing to say on it and stuff, because if I do, I'm gonna get really just on a tangent, and I'm not gonna do that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that I haven't watched any of the trial either. And, this repetitive trauma that African Americans are exposed to, no one else knows or acknowledges that African Americans, that we are exposed to it. It doesn't exist for, or according to a lot of people, and a lot of different groups of people, unfortunately. And, what people fail to realize is that and I hate to go back and I hate to be long winded, but since you asked me, Dr.
Let her
Duncan,
preach.
you know, a little over 400 years ago, the manner in which Africans were brought to America and the way we were treated, this resembles that treatment. Inhuman, and it's not humane. And so when we see this, all of the things that we've been told that are no longer an issue, it reminds us that they are still an issue. On top of that, African Americans are watching other groups of people, non-African Americans, commit offenses and crimes that are much more serious than crimes that, let's just say, George Floyd and many of the other African Americans who were unarmed and not murderers, that they committed. Yeah, some of them used drugs, some of them had petty theft and little crimes, some of them had long rap sheets of petty crimes and that. But because we're talking about years here, George Floyd is the current individual that we're mourning. But there's been so many of them. And I just want to say that, we're in a place in which it's repetitive, and we are faced with watching other people do much worse crimes, and there's no penalty, there's no death, there's not a beating, there's no chains, no whipping. And so it just reminds that Black lives have not mattered. And when the whole Black Lives Matter, when there's an uproar in that area, I think non-African Americans think that it means that other lives don't matter. And that's not what it means at all. What it means is, since 400 years ago, we've not been treated as if our lives matter. So, excuse me, I hate to cough. So the bottom line is, it's one of those things in which it's repetitive and it's traumatic. And I would just like to encourage African Americans to watch as little as possible. We know what the typical outcome is going to be, unfortunately. I'm not saying disregard it, but make sure that you're not exposing yourself to cases like this. And, once again, we've seen murders, mass killings, and the person committing the murder makes it to the jail, makes it to prison and jail, and they get to go through trial. But people like George Floyd, who didn't kill anyone, didn't have a gun or anything like that, to my knowledge, he wasn't armed, correct?
That's correct.
and,
Correct.
and they don't even make it to jail. They don't even make it to the hospital. And that is what Black Lives Matter means. It's that, these people that are not armed, haven't killed anyone, are getting murdered, when people that are murdering people because they're not African Americans get to go. And I've even heard that there's been some stops to get food on the way to jail for a couple of them. But it's not the same. And so just make sure that you understand, for those of you that are suffering from maybe a traumatic response, that you're not alone, that many of us have the same thoughts and sentiments. And find support groups. There's so many different groups of people, and individuals and entities that you can get involved with that are active. And there's many activists and people that can make sure you get the right information. That's also important, to make sure that you're not getting incorrect information from people and entities that's going to have you more upset. Watch your resources and sources.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to touch up on that and stuff because it is very critical. And I know that we have our weeks are slated to talk on a particular topic, but I think that it would be irresponsible for us to not comment on some of the more current events, as they unfold. And, I know that we've been doing this podcast. Carmel, I know the first podcast you've been on with me was in May when Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery had got murdered. And, it's just I am not going to cuss. It's just a shame, the amount of repetitiveness that we're seeing, including the undercover police officer who was African American, who got beat on by white cops in St. Louis. Lo and behold, the case was such a cluster that the feds had to pick up the case, and we don't even know what's going to happen with that. So, I wanted to share that and stuff. I have been reading, I'm always an avid reader of articles, especially in mental health, genre and stuff. But, I've seen a lot of articles about, African Americans who are not, Black people who are not watching the news or following the trial. And if you are in that particular space, it's okay. I've seen enough Rodney Kings and stuff like that to last a lifetime. And unfortunately, it's like I said back in last May, it's not going to stop no time soon.
No.
And that's the sad reality of it. But just to be able to recognize that, we do have help available. And if you can't reach Carmel, we have a list of resources available, for people who want to, whether it's not only just this subject, but just in general. So it's not just parenting. It's not just about kids. It's about your own personal health. And so, I think that personally that they're probably going to give him the manslaughter and give him 5 years and he'll be out in 2. And they're going to have him protected and blah, 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 blah. Or the alternative is that he's going to be acquitted. I doubt they're going to acquit him because it will be a riot. It's just like nothing like you've never seen. But I think the sentence is going to be weak. But I just wanted to touch up on that, and we're going to dovetail out of that quickly before I start going on a very serious, profane-laced rant. So
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Because I mean, I don't know the exact number, but the percentage of acquittals that we've seen with this type of case are extremely high.
oh, absolutely.
And so, it's, once again, I always revert back to, slavery days. It's one of those things where, this type of treatment against African Americans at one point was legal. And so now that it's supposedly illegal, it's very, I think, even challenging for the legal system to see it as a crime. So, it's unfortunate, but it is what it's always been. And so moving forward, once again, we have to make sure that we are taking care of self and taking care of each other. And like Dr. Duncan said, if you find that you're habitually frustrated, definitely seek help so that you can learn how to manage the emotions. Emotional regulation is very important because if you're not able to do that, you're going to see that displayed in your behavior, and it's going to impact your relationships and your overall sense of wellness. So definitely talk to someone.
That's how you shut it down. Great job. All righty. Well, that will conclude our 20th episode of Mahogany Thoughts. And I am the host, Dr. Terrence Duncan, with Queen Carmel Brown. Mr. Butler is trying not to choke any young boys out from staring at his daughters. And we miss you, bro. I know we're definitely looking forward to next week, man, for you man in the mic. So everybody, thank you again. Please subscribe to Spotify. The Mahogany Thoughts is on the YouTube channel, Dr. Terrence Duncan. And please make sure you also check out our books, Your Exhilarating Life on Amazon. Carmel wrote that, as well as the other book on nutrition, which is called, help me out, Carmel. What's your other book called again?
Your Exhilarating Life, and the other one is Nurture Your Body.
Nurture Your Body. I drew a blank and stuff. I saw the visual, but I couldn't, I remember, I saw the picture, but I couldn't remember the words. And then also I have a book on personal development, self-motivation, on the 4 Fits of Holistic Growth, which is on Amazon, as well as the 4 Fits of Dynamic Leadership. And I am down to my last 20 pages of my 300 and something plus page book. So that book looks like it will be released in June, as well as some cool other stuff from the Mahogany Thoughts team that I'm really excited about, getting that underway. You'll see that in the second quarter of 2021. So with that said, thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good night. God bless.
Good night.
Good
night.
night, and we are out.